reach his bottom, living perpetually in what we'll call step zero, that moment of clearly acknowledging a problem with drugs or alcohol, but not taking the next leap into recovery. Kerouac drank when he said he wouldn't drink. When talking about not drinking, he was still talking about drinking. And drinking, thinking, as thinking, drinking permeated the art of his prose. In drinking, Kerouac drowned his desperation, but also his mysticism, until drunk felt more real than not drunk, where drunk obliterated and obviated the obvious truth that anything other than drunk ever existed. Kerouac drunk was morning drunk, evening drunk, always drunk, delicate drunk, man slut drunk. At the beginning of Big Sur, Kerouac heads west to dry out, but gets stuck in San Fran before finding his way to Lawrence Ferlinghetti's cabinet Big Sur. Although the book is filled with lapses into relief and possibility of a spiritual nature, the tender tone tells of defeat. Just about the first 10 pages of the novel describe an entirely desperate man. These are several quotes here right now, one after the other from Kerouac early in the book. Wow, I've hit the end of the trail and can't even drag my body anymore. What he was leaving out east was drunken visitors puking in my study, me drunk practically all the time. There I am, almost 40 years old, bored and jaded. I wake up drunk, sick, disgusted, frightened. In fact, terrified by that sad song, mingling with the cries of the Salvation Army meeting. Satan is the cause of your alcoholism. One fast move or I'm gone, I realize, gone the way of the last 3 years of drunken hopelessness, which is a spiritual and metaphysical hopelessness you can't learn in school. By the end of the 1960s, Jack Kerouac's drinking caught up with him, and the disease killed him. Now, many have argued that alcoholism is an occupational hazard of certain careers, including rock stars and lawyers, but most definitely writers, spawning studies like an excellent book by Dr. Donald W. Goodwin called Alcohol and the Writer. Hemingway and John Cheever and many of the great American writers of the 20th century, all certifiable alcoholics. In many ways, Jack Kerouac and Neal Cassady show us the light, but they also get burned by it. On the Road speaks of a kind of holy lightning that strikes Neal Cassady in his visions, but it also strikes us down in the consequences for what those visions might bring. Addiction arises from a spiritual hunger that goes back to Adam and Eve in the garden. No fruit, no matter how wise or succulent, can take the place of God in our lives. Recovering addict and legendary rock star David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, looking back on the late 1960s, counterculture reflects. We were right about a lot of things. We were right about the war. We were right about the environment. We were right about civil rights and women's issues, he says. But we were wrong about the drugs. Kerouac and Cassady were right about living in the moment, about rejecting the ways of the world, about the complementary teachings of Jesus and Buddha, about the spirituality of everything and every man in everyday life, even and especially about the spiritual aspects of travel, an itinerant lifestyle on the road. We know from the early writings of Christianity that Jesus and Paul and the disciples and the early church movement folk certainly lived on the road, traveling by foot. But Jack Kerouac and Neal Cassady were definitely wrong about the alcohol and the drugs and how to treat women. Jack Kerouac's response to the madness of the world was to become one with, and one of the famous quotes from On the Road, to become with the mad ones. The ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved. Like Kerouac, we can let our cups overflow with life, with conversation, with saving grace, like Kerouac and Neal Cassady. But let's not admire the least of these so much that we become prisoners of our own desires. Let's not get too close to the light and burn out, but rather hold our candles high, pointing to the light that always comes from God and always returns to God. Thank you.